A gregarious young man, just months away from his wedding day.
He was always happy. All he wanted in life was to have a family, work hard, and fall in love.
Has his future viciously ripped away.
It was evident the young man had been bludgeoned.
It hurt me so much, and I lost it. I lost it. Me volví loca.
Investigators are sent down a rabbit hole of suspects.
He was violently jealous.
He's a significant drug dealer. It looked like that he may have been kidnapped.
They were accompanying a very scared-looking Hispanic young man.
Before a shocking revelation.
What he was describing was more like something off of a TV show.
Turns the case on its head.
What he did to us changed our life forever.
It was a shock to all of us.
It came as an absolute surprise.
He had no remorse, he had no guilt. He's a monster.
Cornelius, a small town in northern Oregon, nestled among picturesque orchards.
Cornelius is a longtime farming community. It's a very kind of nice, sort of sleepy place.
It's kind of a little bedroom community. It's mostly a blue-collar town, working class.
The calm of Cornelius is shaken one quiet morning with the reported disappearance of 20-year-old Gonzalo Pizano Guzman.
That morning, my mom saw that Gonzalo's bed was made, like no one slept there. So she obviously got all concerned. He didn't come home last night. And then my mom tells me to go to the police station with Sol to report him missing.
His fiancée, Sol, and his sister, Juana, had been actively looking for him that day.
That morning, the family contacted his place of employment. He had not shown up for work.
The family was extremely distraught by this disappearance. He doesn't miss work without calling in. They couldn't reach him by pager or by telephone.
And we're all freaking out because this is not who he is and what he does. It's so odd, it's not normal.
We learned that Saul had seen Gonzalo the night before. They had visited with each other until about 9:15 that evening, and Saul reported seeing him leaving in his car alone, headed home.
But he did not return home last night.
To aid the detectives, Saul provides a description of what Gonzalo was wearing when she last saw him.
He had on an athletic top with some numbers on it, and specifically 2 gold chains.
While Juana and Saul speak with police, other family members frantically look for Gonzalo.
We all went different ways in our cars, driving around just to see if we found his car. We were trying to look for anything.
My dad thought, maybe he got in an accident. We were desperate. We just wanted a clue.
Around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we all started feeling like, okay, something's wrong now.
On the outskirts of town, Gonzalo's father makes a disturbing discovery.
My dad spotted the car in an empty field. When he saw the car, the white car, he knew right away that was Gonzalo's car. He found the car burned up. He rushed to the car, opened up the car, and didn't find any body. So once that happened, it was just nuts. Where is he at? Did he get kidnapped? Is he dead? It was even worse.
Detectives arrive and search for signs of what happened to Gonzalo.
The car was totally destroyed by fire. It appeared that the car had been heavily doused with accelerant, probably gasoline.
Somebody was clearly trying to cover up evidence from inside that vehicle.
There was no evidence of any body.
There were zip ties found near the car.
As far as the scene was concerned, it yielded minimal clues. As the car had been burned completely, the chances of DNA or blood or fingerprints were greatly reduced.
Later that afternoon, another chilling discovery is made, just 11 miles away.
A citizen had seen something that looked like a dead body in the ditch on her road. The body was found about a 15-20-minute drive from where the burned car was.
This young man matched both the physical description, the clothing, and the jewelry. At this point, there was no doubt that this was Gonzalo. It was clearly a homicide. There was evidence of bullet wounds on the body and what appeared to be repeated knife blows to the heart. We also discovered some injuries to the back of the head, and it was evident the young man had been bludgeoned.
It was apparent that he died of violent death.
We felt almost immediately that this was very personal in nature. There was no phone and there was no wallet at the scene, but he still had his jewelry with him, which were gold. So the thought of this being a robbery was off the table pretty quickly. There was another motive here.
There were zip ties found near the body, and they matched the zip ties from the scene of the car. One of the things that went through my head was, had someone brought zip ties to restrain Gonzalo? We also located 4 spent casings from a .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
After finishing up at the crime scene, police are faced with the difficult task of delivering the devastating news to Gonzalo's family.
The police came early in the morning. I opened the door and they told me, "We found your brother, but unfortunately he's dead." I was in shock.
Grité. Me volví loca. Y yo gritaba. Y gritaba y gritaba. I heard my mom screaming. It was something I never want to hear again. It's not even a scream. It's a pain so deep that only moms know what that is. I found out that he was murdered. And I lost it. I lost it. Era gritar, llorar. Algo tan fuerte que todavía de mi mente no se ha acabado. To know that such an amazing person was taken away, he didn't deserve to die that way. Bottom line is, I don't have my brother anymore.
Born in Mexico in 1979, Gonzalo had a playful spirit.
He loved to dance, he loved music, always a smile, always caring, and always joking around with people.
Gonzalo era un muchacho alegre y llegaba, me abrazaba y siempre quería bailar conmigo.
When the family moved to the United States in 1989, outgoing Gonzalo settled in quickly.
He was very charming. He was really good looking. He was popular with the girls. So he was always asked to be in quinceañeras, which is a traditional, party for us Mexicans when you turn 15.
In 1998, Gonzalo met Marisol Mora at a party, and the teenagers quickly fell in love.
De que estaba muy enamorado de Marisol. Marisol era el amor de su vida de Gonzalo. Era todo para él. Todo.
It was that genuine love and happiness. There was a light in him. He was a completely different person, a happy, full person. All he wanted in life was to have a family, work hard, and fall in love.
After a whirlwind romance, Gonzalo proposed to Marisol.
So the wedding was set to be in September. That was just a couple of months after he was murdered. We have a big family, so it was going to be a big deal.
But instead of a wedding, Gonzalo's loved ones are left heartbroken and grieving. While his family plans a funeral, detectives are digging into the work of this homicide case.
This case was puzzling. There really didn't seem to be a strong motive as to why this young man was murdered. Everything was going good in his life.
He was responsible. He wasn't involved in gangs.
He's just very well-liked, very upbeat, and just a trustworthy young man.
It was really difficult. There were still so many unanswered questions, and we had no definitive leads as to who would have caused this or who we were looking for.
The fact that there was still a killer out there, to me, it was very ominous.
This is very grim. We needed to really look into who was responsible for this.
Coming up, investigators uncover a menacing grudge.
He held an extreme dislike for Gonzalo.
He was determined to have Gonzalo killed.
The knife wounds directed at the heart did speak of extreme animosity.
And leads them to discover a web of alarming secrets and lies.
She wasn't in love with Gonzalo, and he wasn't in love with her.
She admitted it was all a lie.
He saw skinheads in the vehicle.
And that's when we really started to think something was wrong.
Before the truth blindsides everyone.
I was like in shock. It was so senseless. It was so senseless.
In the town of Cornelius, Oregon, police are investigating the vicious murder of 20-year-old Gonzalo Pizano Guzman. Wanting more details about his last known movements, detectives speak to his fiancée, Sol.
She described in detail how Gonzalo had come to her house on the night of the 6th, that they sat out front on the porch.
They were discussing their plans for the upcoming wedding and going over a guest list. She stated that following the conversation that he left around 9 o'clock. She stated while they were sitting on the porch that her cousin Jaime and a friend Eddie were playing in the garage of the house, apparently shooting baskets.
That led us to believe that these two young fellows may have been the last known persons to see Gonzalo alive. So it was important that we interview them.
Investigators bring Jaime and Eddie into the sheriff's office.
During the interview, both stated that they had to get to work that night and approached Gonzalo as he was getting in his car and asked if they could get a ride.
They were running late for work. They worked on a janitorial crew run by Saul's brother, Raphael.
They had to be at work in Hillsboro at the Hawthorne Farms Fitness Center at 10 o'clock.
They said Raphael picked them up and took them to work at the athletic club, and that eventually they got off at about 4:30 in the morning.
The fact that they both gave the same statement actually provided themselves an alibi. They did not offer any conflict that they had with Gonzalo. They indicated that they had no reason to hurt him.
To corroborate Jaime and Eddie's alibi, police speak to their boss, Saul's brother, Raphael.
We interviewed him at his house. He was very cooperative, very smooth, very polite, had his own business, a young entrepreneur.
Raphael was an incredibly self-possessed 19-year-old. He had created a janitorial service.
Although he was very young, had a very good contract, had his own cleaning company, and appeared to be very successful.
Detectives ask him to confirm Jaime and Eddie's story.
He confirmed that he had picked them up at Eddie's house and drove them to work. He confirmed their story that they had worked cleaning the health club that night. He said that he was at the athletic club until about 4 in the morning. So Raphael, in effect, corroborates Eddie and Jaime's version of events on the night of the 6th. So we kind of set them aside.
With Jaime and Eddie alibied, investigators turned to the autopsy report, hoping to find new leads.
It became very apparent just how violently he had died.
The medical examiner did find 3 blunt force blows to his skull.
The autopsy also showed that he had been shot 5 times. And then he had also been stabbed 5 times, very brutally, in the area of the heart.
The close cluster of the knife wounds directed at the heart did speak of extreme animosity, some violent emotion.
The gunshot wounds made it appear that his hands were up in a defensive gesture.
Gonzalo was likely pleading for some measure of mercy, and ultimately, none was to be had.
The autopsy report also determines that Gonzalo's death occurred around 10 p.m. With the findings in hand, investigators now turn to Gonzalo's workplace, searching for possible suspects.
We interviewed his supervisor. Gonzalo's boss described him as reliable, steady worker, punctual.
As detectives dig deeper, they learn about a startling new side to Gonzalo.
It appeared that he had a relationship with one of the security guards that worked there.
Gonzalo's boss did tell us there may have been some possible involvement between the security guard, Bobette, and Gonzalo. So we needed to look into it. We needed to interview her.
Police bring Bobette, Gonzalo's alleged girlfriend, in for questioning.
She was very upset about his death.
She was very emotional, very distraught about finding out that Gonzalo had been murdered, and ultimately disclosed that, in fact, she had had a very intimate relationship with Gonzalo for a couple months, but she made it very clear she wasn't in love with Gonzalo, and he wasn't in love with her.
Bobette described her relationship with Gonzalo as kind of a fling. It was kept secret. She understood that he was engaged to be married, but it crossed our minds that maybe Bobette's feelings were stronger than she let on.
Maybe she did not want this wedding to go forward.
The wedding was planned for September, only a few months away. Police asked Gonzalo's coworker about her movements on the day of the murder.
Bobette had been at several different locations that day, running errands, and she had receipts to support that. So she was ruled out as a suspect.
But while Bobette's cleared of suspicion, she hands detectives a crucial tip.
Bobette mentioned an ex-boyfriend named Oscar Rodriguez.
She told us Oscar was quite jealous.
He was extraordinarily jealous, apparently had been violently jealous in the past.
About 4 days before the murder, Oscar had found out about her relationship with Gonzalo. He became infuriated and began accusing her of cheating on him.
That could be a motive for Gonzalo's murder, so Oscar became a lead suspect.
Only 2 days into the investigation of the vicious murder of Gonzalo Pizano-Guzman, police discover he was involved with his coworker, Bobette. Now she's pointed the finger at her jealous ex, Oscar Rodriguez.
She speculated that maybe he had something to do with it. We looked into him. He had a criminal history.
He'd been pretty extensively involved in gangs at that point in his life, and he was well known to the local police.
Very much an impulsive young man that was also involved in drug activity and drug use. Bobette told us that this was a relationship she had to escape from. She personally felt threatened by his presence and his behavior.
And she was very worried that perhaps he was the one that took some action towards Gonzalo.
Investigators uncover a troubling detail about Oscar's life.
It was discovered that Oscar Rodriguez's mother lived right next door to the victim's family.
The investigation kind of perked up as far as focusing in on Oscar, given the fact that he had such access to Gonzalo.
Detective suspicion grows further when they speak to Oscar himself.
When Oscar Rodriguez was interviewed, he lied to us and told us he had not had any contact at all with Bobette and didn't really know anything about what was going on. When we started to confront him that this was in contradiction to the information that we had from Bobette, he became furious, started yelling at us, "You don't trust me." He stated he had no claims to continue any relationship with Bobette, and he wanted to wash his hands of this entire investigation. Because of his nature, he just drew suspicion upon himself.
He was asked if he'd take a polygraph to show that he didn't have anything to do with Gonzalo's murder. He became very volatile and immediately demanded to end the interview.
And actually stormed out of the interview.
With Oscar not cooperating, detectives investigate his whereabouts during the time of the murder.
During this time frame, Oscar Rodriguez was actually serving a sentence in the restitution center.
The restitution center is a work-release facility for low to mid-level offenders, where Oscar could get passes to go out and find work.
So the question was, did Oscar have a pass at the date and time of the murder? Was it possible that he wasn't in the restitution center?
He is on a strict timeline. He had to check in, check out. It's a secure facility. The building is locked. There are alarms on all the doors and windows.
At the restitution center, there is a lockdown period at night until early in the morning.
After the records were examined, it was positively concluded that he was in the restitution center at the time Gonzalo was killed.
It was impossible for him to have been involved in the actual homicide.
And ultimately, he was ruled out as a suspect.
It's been a week since the murder, and the investigation is no closer to finding a suspect. Meanwhile, the family prepares to bury their beloved Gonzalo.
It was really hard on everybody. My mom decided she wanted to take him to Mexico. He was buried over there, and we all stayed for a while trying to grieve together as a family and process what had just happened to our family. My mom was just devastated.
It hurt me so much to lose Gonzalo. I was grieving deeply. I was in denial. I was in my own world. And I don't even know how I got by.
While the family grieves in Mexico, the community of Cornelius is feeling on edge.
There wasn't a quick arrest within a couple days or a week. This caused concern in the community because no one knew who did it.
Searching for new leads, detectives turn to the public.
We decided to put out a reward for information, and the idea was to get people to come forward if they knew anything and let them know that we're a little bit frustrated with where this investigation is going. We need public help.
Nearly 2 weeks after Gonzalo's murder, police get a tip that sends the investigation in a whole new direction.
We got a call from an employee of the SB gas station.
His name was Ryan Petty. He claimed that he had seen some graffiti written in the bathroom of the gas station. And the graffiti said, "Gonzalo Guzman, 12th Street Gang, please help, call the police."
And once he heard about the reward, he put Gonzalo with that name Gonzalo and recognized it must be the same victim who had left that cry for help on the wall.
Detectives rush to the gas station to interview Ryan. While interviewing him, he divulges a shocking revelation.
So what called his attention to the bathroom was shortly before he saw a car pull up, a white Monte Carlo, that had, in his words, skinheads in the vehicle.
One of them allegedly had a swastika tattooed on his body.
They were accompanying a very scared-looking Hispanic young man.
He stated that it looked like that Gonzalo may have been kidnapped. That was significant in the fact that we felt this was a big break that came in the case.
Nearly 2 weeks after Gonzalo Pizano Guzman was found brutally murdered, a gas station attendant named Ryan Petty has told police he saw Gonzalo with 3 suspicious men the night he was killed.
He described a carload of skinheads that had drove up and a young man in the back seat who appeared frightened, and they escorted him into the men's restroom for a short period of time.
He said that ultimately, out of the bathroom, the Hispanic individual came out and they hustled him back into the car and drove away. Ryan Petty reported that when he went into the bathroom after an individual left it, he saw written on the wall, "Gonzalo Guzman, help, 12th Street Gang, call police."
But as detectives dig into Ryan's story, some details don't add up.
Had it been Gonzalo who had gone into that bathroom afraid for his life and put his name on the wall, he never would have written his name as Gonzalo Guzman.
We knew that was incorrect. He would not sign his name in that nature. That was the maternal name. He would have used the paternal name.
Guzman is his mother's name. He would have written his name as Gonzalo Pizano. Pizano is his father's name.
And so, right away, this was suspicious.
And just the whole nature of what he was describing was more like something off of a TV show. The skinheads, the swastika. It just didn't ring true.
And so it was suspected that he was trying to come forward for the reward. We looked through the videotape from the SB station during the period of time this employee stated that car had gone by. There was nothing in that videotape that corroborated anything he had told us.
No white Monte Carlo, no individuals who could be characterized as skinheads. More importantly, no individual who was a scared Hispanic person being escorted to the bathroom.
The examination of the surveillance video at the gas station contradicted Ryan Petty's version of events. And also, one of the issues was he didn't report this right away.
When police check Ryan's record, they find more troubling news.
He had a pretty checkered past.
He was no stranger to the criminal justice system.
Some of his arrests were for crimes that would cause you to doubt his honesty. In my mind, we ruled it out as pure fabrication. It just was too cute, too stereotypical. The mistake with the Spanish surname, I didn't buy it.
With another lead exhausted, investigators face a daunting realization.
We reached a point where we were getting nowhere. Leads weren't panning out.
Having no significant suspect is very depressing.
Really, if you don't solve these cases early on, the longer they go, the likelihood that you're actually going to be able to solve them becomes less and less.
In cases like this where we're not getting anywhere, especially on a homicide, we took this very personal. Up to that point, this team had not had an unresolved homicide.
The lack of progress also adds to the pain suffered by Gonzalo's family.
It was very hard. It was very painful to come back from Mexico and there was no arrest yet.
Fue algo fuerte para mí. Mucho dolor. Tenía mucho coraje y mucho odio en mi corazón.
Everything was very silent, and we were getting very, very impatient. My mom was getting very impatient with the detectives, and all they told us is to please trust them. So we put our life in their hands.
2 more months pass without an arrest. With the case at a standstill, detectives review the entire investigation for something they may have missed.
It can be very frustrating when you reach that point where you've kind of hit the wall, but you just have to resolve to redouble your efforts and to keep digging, keep pushing.
It was time to go back and look over everybody one more time. We knew that Eddie and Jaime were the last people to see Gonzalo at Saul's house the night of the murder.
Even though they'd been interviewed and gave a pretty good account of their activity that night, their boss, Rafael, provided an alibi for them. We wanted to be sure. So at this stage is when we asked them to take a polygraph. But when we began to ask them to take a polygraph, they started dodging and weaving.
For some reason, they began to balk, and this threw a red flag as to why they weren't coming forward. Again, these are the last 2 people to see Gonzalo alive. And now they're getting cold feet about taking a polygraph exam.
And that's when we really started to think something was wrong.
Detectives keep the pressure on Jaime and Eddie, and on September 14th, Eddie comes in for his polygraph.
The polygrapher was hooking Eddie up, attaching these leads to him to measure his response. And he doesn't even get to the questions. And Eddie says, "Okay, I'll tell you what happened."
And he immediately makes it clear that he wants to tell everything that happened.
In police parlance, he spilled it.
Two months after the murder of Gonzalo Pizano Guzman, detectives are re-interviewing witnesses, hoping for a break. Now, Eddie, one of the last people to see Gonzalo alive, has told police he knows more than he's let on.
He gave a detailed, recorded statement about what happened on the night of the murder.
As he talks to investigators, Eddie drops a bombshell.
He disclosed that he had actually been approached by his boss, Rafael, who was Saul's brother, to coordinate delivering Gonzalo to the Forest Hills Country Club parking lot.
Eddie told us that it had all been planned out by Raphael. Raphael had enlisted Joe Noble to help with this crime. Joe was Raphael's friend. Eddie went on to tell us that night he and Jaime lured Gonzalo to drive his car to the golf course. And as they pulled up, Joe Noble appeared with a gun in his hand. And as Eddie and Jaime got out of Gonzalo's car, Noble got into the car, pointing the gun at Gonzalo. And also present in the parking lot was Raphael and his white Ford F-150.
Gonzalo was driven away by Raphael and Joe, but Eddie claims he has no idea what happened next.
He stated that he and Jaime had left the country club and got into their vehicle, left and went home and went to work as usual.
Could the brother of Gonzalo's fiancée, Saul, really be behind his brutal murder?
It was extremely surprising to suddenly see Rafael Mora as somebody different than this really incredibly self-possessed 19-year-old who started his own business.
But according to Eddie, Raphael leads a disturbing double life.
Eddie told us that Raphael was a pretty active drug dealer.
The nice entrepreneur cover of Raphael was all a lie. He's a significant drug dealer, and it appears orchestrated the kidnapping of Gonzalo with Joe Noble.
This completely surprised me. Raphael did appear, at least on the surface, to be legit, and now he's not who we thought he was.
It was a shock to all of us.
The one thing detectives still need to know is why Raphael would want to kill his future brother-in-law.
Up to that point in time, there was nothing to link him. There was no motive that anybody could speak of.
Investigators first turned their attention to Joe Noble, suspecting he may have been taking orders from Raphael.
Joe Noble was known as a small-time criminal. An informant told us he was very concerned about a .40 caliber pistol he had sold to Joe Noble. And he suspected that this may have been the murder weapon used in the killing of Gonzalo.
That's not the last of the informant's revelations.
He said that Joe Noble had talked to a female at one of the local bars and had asked her to alibi for him on the particular night in question.
We contacted her. She told us that yes, Joe had asked her to say he was with her on the night of the 6th, and most importantly, she said, I wasn't with him.
Police bring Joe in for questioning.
Joe denied having any involvement whatsoever to the murder.
During our interview with Joe, he actually tried to use the alibi, and then when we confronted him with the fact that we'd already talked to her and she said it was all BS, then he stopped talking.
Joel stated that he wanted an attorney and didn't want to talk anymore.
With nothing concrete to hold Joe, police are forced to release him and turn their attention to Raphael.
Investigators learned that Raphael's cleaning business was not all that it was purported to be. He had a contract with the Hawthorne Farms Athletic Club.
The manager of the health club was not very impressed with the quality of Raphael's work and the work of his crew.
It was really a shoddy operation, by all accounts.
We considered the fact that the cleaning company may have been a front for Raphael's drug dealing.
Raphael told police he was cleaning the gym with Eddie and Jaime the night of Gonzalo's murder, so investigators checked with management in order to corroborate his alibi.
The manager of the club said he often couldn't reach him, so we had no idea if he was there or not on the night of the murder.
With his alibi falling apart, detectives asked Raphael's sister, Saul, why he might want Gonzalo dead.
Saul admitted that Raphael had had a serious talk with her and that it was clear that he was opposed to the wedding, felt she was too young.
Raphael did not want Gonzalo marrying Saul.
Just did not see Gonzalo as being worthy of marrying into the family. Investigators learned that Raphael would mock Gonzalo for the car he drove. He'd mock him for bringing over a bottle of wine to his parents that was cheap and not any good.
Raphael held an extreme dislike for Gonzalo. When accompanied by friends, he would go by Gonzalo's car and talk about keying it or smashing a window out and laughing about it.
With the evidence against Raphael stacking up, police are ready to bring him in for an interview. But there's just one setback.
He disappeared. At this point, it's become pretty apparent that Raphael's got something to hide. When you put it all together, there was probable cause to arrest him.
With a warrant for Raphael's arrest, police initiate a manhunt.
He had a girlfriend named Sandy Montez. We found him hiding at his girlfriend's house. He had dyed his hair orange, and it was obvious that he had done it to try to change his identity.
On September 28, 2000, Raphael is officially charged with first-degree kidnapping and aggravated murder.
I was like in shock. I had so much anger at Raphael. It's an anger I can't explain.
Just when police believe they have their man, the investigation takes another shocking turn.
We had Raphael in custody when his girlfriend showed up with evidence stating that there's no way he could have been at the murder scene. This raised some obvious concerns.
Could it be possible that Raphael was not involved in Gonzalo's murder?
It came as an absolute surprise.
Police have arrested Rafael Mora in the death of his sister's fiancé, Gonzalo Pizano Guzman. But now, Rafael's girlfriend, Cindy, claims she has an alibi for him on the night of the murder.
Cindy produced a receipt from a auto detailing place that purported to have dropped off Raphael's vehicle the night of the murder, and that Raphael was there and signed for it. It was presented as a solid piece of evidence that Raphael was working at the athletic club the night in question, and they had the receipt to prove it. And an individual named Cassandra, who owned the company, had signed off and was going to be an alibi witness.
Checking the validity of the receipt, police interview Cassandra, who admits to being a friend of Raphael.
With a little bit of prodding by the investigators, she finally admitted that, in fact, the receipt was fake.
She confessed it was all a lie, orchestrated by Raphael.
It was something that she dummied up because Raphael had asked her to.
With Raphael's alibi discredited, investigators turn up the heat on co-conspirator Joe Noble.
He told the officers that he hadn't been completely honest.
He admitted that he was at the parking lot at the golf course. He was there when the car was burned. He admits the kidnap. He admits to pistol whipping the victim.
He said that it was Raphael ordering him to do that. They then picked up Gonzalo, put him in the back of a Ford white pickup truck.
And then Raphael drove Joe home with the victim knocked out in the back of the truck.
But when he last saw Gonzalo, albeit knocked out, was still alive.
And then supposedly Raphael would have then driven back out to Hag Lake and killed Gonzalo.
Detectives have a hard time believing Joe was not there when Gonzalo was finally killed, but have no proof.
We had no physical evidence that we could link them to the crime, and it was frustrating.
Desperate, investigators obtain security footage from businesses along the route they believe Raphael and Joe would have taken to and from the murder. Something on one of the tapes grabs their attention.
We saw Raphael's pickup pull into the gas station to get gas.
And lo and behold, there's Joseph Noble getting out of the white Ford and going into the gas station.
And the timing of the gas station surveillance footage indicated that would have been probably shortly after the murder.
Police also obtain a warrant for Raphael's phone records.
Raphael insisted all along that he couldn't have committed the murder because he was miles away cleaning the gym. And lo and behold, at the time of the murder, his phone was not bouncing off the nearest tower to the athletic club. It was bouncing off the nearest tower to Hag Lake, which puts him in the area of the murder. That was huge.
I felt ecstatic because I knew in that moment that we had him, and it absolutely, conclusively meant that his alibi at the athletic club was false.
This was a big moment of actually having some physical evidence.
There's a great deal of satisfaction, too, having found the truth.
With the new evidence in hand, prosecutors are confident they can secure a conviction. And in 2003, Joe Noble and Rafael Mora are tried together.
Both were charged with aggravated murder and with kidnapping in the first degree.
At trial, prosecutors present a picture of what they believe happened to Gonzalo the night he was murdered.
Rafael did not want him marrying his sister.
Rafael was determined to have Gonzalo killed.
And so he hatched a plan to get Gonzalo out to the golf course.
Lured Gonzalo out there with Eddie and Jaime.
After getting out of the car, Gonzalo was beat and pistol whipped and thrown into the back seat of the pickup. Rafael or Joe then set the car on fire and they proceeded to Hag Lake.
They drove to an isolated spot. Gonzalo got out of the car. The gun was pointed at him.
We believe that he was shot multiple times by Joe and that Rafael was the one that wanted to get the final word in and stabbed him multiple times in the heart.
On the stand, a witness reveals Rafael bragged to him about the murder.
That Gonzalo was begging for his life, that Gonzalo was promising that he would stop the relationship with Saul, that he would move to Mexico.
Mató a mi hijo de esa manera tan cruel. Gonzalo no se merecía esa muerte tan fuerte, nada más para que no se casara con Marisol.
No one deserves to be killed that way. No one. It was so senseless. It was so senseless.
On April 28, 2003, the jury finds Rafael and Joe guilty of Gonzalo's murder.
Joe was sentenced to life with a possibility of parole after 25 years. Rafael was sentenced to straight life, no possibility of parole.
After 5 years in prison, Rafael appeals his conviction, arguing ineffective counsel.
The judge decided that this case should go back to trial, which was a shock to all of us.
Ultimately, a decision was made to allow Rafael to plead to manslaughter in the first degree.
Rafael's sentence is reduced to 25 years and 10 months. With time served, he will be eligible for early release in 2024.
He had no remorse. He had no guilt. He's a monster. What he did to us changed our life forever. He destroyed us.
Even after everything they've endured, Gonzalo's family remains inspired by his memory.
Yo lloré por muchos años, mucho tiempo, y un día yo lo soñé. Yo estoy bien, Mal. No llores por mí. Yo estoy muy bien. Y yo lo miré riéndose y me dijo que ya no llorara por él, que él estaba bien, que él estaba en paz.
He was a happy person that wanted everybody around him to have that same joy and made sure that we were always laughing. Those are the moments that I will always cherish the most. Gonzalo was one of the most genuine men that I've known, that I continue to admire.
A devoted couple building the perfect family.
They were both very committed to adopting children that had a difficult past.
Everybody in the family loved her.
Murdered in a night of unspeakable horror.
She saw a man with what appeared to be an axe.
Her skull was split with a maul.
Who could have wanted Bob and Kay Swartz dead?
This person had threatened to kill them.
We couldn't rule out anyone. We just didn't know.
And what detectives uncovered has everyone blindsided.
I didn't have a single suspicion. I would have never thought.
The relatives were in disbelief.
The expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Nobody in a million years would have expected them to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
On a cold winter morning in 1984,
Colorado County Police.
Police in Cape St. Clair, Maryland, receive an eerie call.
Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yeah.
First responders race to the scene and make a horrific discovery.
When I arrived, there were uniformed officers that were protecting the crime scene who told me we had a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old who just learned that their parents, Bob and Kay Schwartz, were killed.
The children are visibly shaken and in shock, but agree to answer a few questions.
My partner and I met with a young man by the name of Larry Schwartz and his sister Annie. Both of them were very calm. This young man, he said that he had gotten up that morning and that Annie, who was 9, told them that she didn't know where their parents were. He then looked out the dining room window and saw his mother's body in the backyard. He told me he immediately shielded Annie's eyes so Annie wouldn't see her body and called the police.
Detective Barr leaves the kids in the care of the attending officers and moves to the backyard. It's his first grim look at the scene of the crime.
Kay Schwartz was found outside. She was a few feet from the sliding glass door in the snow. She only had one sock on her right foot. Her left foot was bare.
The blood in the snow was horrific. It was just horrific.
The blood had created a slush in the snow. Kay Schwartz had puncture wounds around her neck, and she had a massive wound to the top of her skull.
Detective Barr then heads inside.
I looked in the basement area, and I found a black vinyl chair that had pooled blood beside it. It appeared as though she had been attacked sitting in that chair, and she bled heavily onto the floor. And there was blood from that chair leading out back.
Just when it seems the crime scene can't get any more grisly, detectives discover another ravaged body.
We found a small office adjacent to the landing of the stairs. The door was closed. We opened the door, looked inside, and found Bob Schwartz's body. There was an inordinate number of stab wounds to Bob Schwartz. There were defensive wounds in the body. We theorized at that point, and it was very possible that Kay was attacked first, and then Bob heard the noise and started to come out of the room, giving Kay the opportunity to flee out the back door as the killer or killers went after Bob.
As detectives make their way through the rest of the house, they see no signs of forced entry. Did Bob and Kay know their attacker? Or did an intruder sneak in through an unlocked door?
As I viewed this crime scene, the enormity was off the chart. There was blood found everywhere. It was extraordinarily gruesome.
Investigators collect blood evidence, but there's no sign of a knife or any kind of murder weapon. Then, toward the back of the house, they spot a critical clue.
We found a bloody palm print on the sliding glass door near Kay's body. We wanted to figure out who it actually belonged to. Bob obviously never left the computer room. He died where he was attacked. And Kay's body was outside, and neither one of her hands had blood on the palms. That palm print probably belonged to the killer.
While concerned neighbors whisk Larry and Annie away, detectives get a chance to talk to some of Bob and Kay's grieving friends who have gathered at the house.
When I found out that Bob and Kay had been murdered, I said, "What? You're numb. You don't know what happened." And I just couldn't believe that Bob and Kay were gone.
Bob and Kay Schwartz met at the University of Maryland outside Washington, D.C. They were both getting their master's degree in education. They both wanted to be teachers. He was 35, she was 27. She fell in love with him, and maybe 18 months later, they married.
They were very involved in all kinds of church activities. Kay and Bob were intimately involved. Everybody seemed to know them. Everybody felt a connection with them.
Bob was an engineer of sorts, worked at NASA Goddard down in Greenbelt, Maryland, in the space program on some level.
Bob had to be a pretty clever man because he was involved in computers back in the dark ages, 1984.
He was always very positive. He was funny, quick sense of humor.
Kay was the fun-loving, carefree spirit, beloved by everyone who knew her. Always wanted to be a teacher, became a teacher. They wanted children, but Kay was unable to have children.
Far from breaking their spirit, Bob and Kay's disappointment only seemed to strengthen their bond and gave them a loving sense of purpose.
They decided they wanted to open their house and their hearts.
In 1973, Bob and Kay embarked on their dream.
That became part of their mission in life, in adopting children that had a difficult past, to provide some substance and some guidance.
Larry Swartz was 6 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. 6 years later, they adopted a 4-year-old girl, Anne.
Annie was born in Korea, did not speak much English when she first arrived. Annie and Larry were happy to be part of that family.
Kay and Bob wanted to be the best parents ever to those children.
Now, Larry and Annie were orphans again, and detectives need to find out who committed such a heinous crime and why. Police begin by talking to neighbors, hoping to find a witness who might lead them to the killer.
We were alerted by a person approximately a block away on a parallel street that he had found what appeared to be a blood trail leading into the woods at the end of that street. And as we followed that trail, we found what appeared to be a barefoot footprint and a socked footprint.
Were these Kay's footprints? If so, how did they end up in the woods when her body was found in the backyard?
We also found a pair of footprints made by shoes. Footprints suggesting a chase through the neighborhood.
The trail of footprints ran for quite a distance through the woods and the neighborhood.
The footprints seemed to suggest that after stabbing Bob to death, the murderer went after Kay one last time.
In my opinion, it appeared as though Kay Schwartz was fleeing from her killer, and at some point, a person caught up with her and then walked her to the back of the home where she was killed.
At the end of the trail, detectives make one more pivotal discovery.
Searching through the woods, my sergeant found what appeared to be a murder weapon. It was a wood-splitting maul. There appeared to be blood on the maul, along with hair. But the handle appeared to have been wiped clean. There wasn't any blood on the handle at all.
Detectives send the maul to the lab, but find no trace of a knife anywhere. It's a puzzling scene that offers them few clues.
It was a very difficult crime scene to try to put together in your mind what may have happened or how did this occur. At this point, we only had 2 children, Larry and Annie, who could provide any information.
When detectives circle back to them at the neighbor's house, they do their best to help.
Annie related to us that she had awakened in the middle of the night to her father's screams of "help me, help me." She continued to tell us that she went to investigate and she walked to the door that exited to the carport. At that point, she saw a man walking away with what appeared to be an axe over his shoulder. And she described the person as very tall, with curly hair, and asked, "Was that person as tall as me?" She said, "No, he was taller."
Detectives speak to Larry next, but suddenly the 17-year-old seems nervous. Does he know something about the man Annie saw in the yard?
When we pressed Larry, he said that Michael was 6'4".
Detectives stop cold. Who is Michael?
And very quickly, I established that Michael Schwartz was a brother of Larry.
As it turned out, Bob and Kay Swartz had adopted 3 children.
Michael, who was also 17, no longer lived with them, but it wasn't clear why. So at that point, we were very, very eager to talk to Michael.
Coming up, investigators uncover bad blood and dark secrets.
They send him to a state mental hospital.
Detectives uncover startling clues.
Nobody expected anything like this to happen.
It became almost unbelievable.
Was there more than one person with a score to settle?
This person said, I could stick a knife in his back.
We didn't know what we were dealing with.
When they appear to have no suspects in the homicides of Bob and Kay Swartz, police learn the couple's adopted children have an estranged brother.
Both Annie and Larry related to us that Michael no longer lived with them, but had been getting into a lot of trouble.
Detectives are anxious to know more. Could Michael have possibly wanted to harm Bob and Kay?
As we spoke to relatives during the investigation, Michael was quickly identified by them as someone we should look at very closely.
Michael had made threats internally in the house.
Detectives interview the Swartz's friends and family to get more insight into Michael's history. Larry was the Swartz's first adopted child. But long before Annie, Bob and Kay provided Larry with a brother.
Michael was 8 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. The boys were only 6 months apart in age.
The Swartz's second adopted child had arrived at their home, a troubled boy.
As they interviewed everybody, detectives found that Michael's mother abandoned him when he was an infant, and Michael was relinquished to the custody of the state and became a foster child. He went through a series of 6 foster homes before the Swartzes adopted him.
Bob and Kay were determined to turn Michael's life around, but the boy's difficult past wasn't easy to shake, and the problem started almost immediately.
Michael was so antisocial in his approach to life. Michael was having behavioral issues at home, not obeying his parents on a consistent basis, smarting back, profanity.
As the boys grew older, Michael continued to struggle. But that didn't stop Bob and Kay from having high hopes for both their children.
I think Bob and Kay expected Larry and Michael to apply themselves very diligently to their studies and to do well. I think that Larry had a desire to please people. He had kind of a soft-spoken shyness to him. He seemed to want to engage with people. But I think Michael was a challenge from the get-go. I think Michael, he had some deviancies that probably would have precluded anybody from having any type of relationship with him on any level.
2 years after Michael was adopted, Bob and Kay found a new ray of hope when they adopted Annie.
Annie was cute as a button when she arrived. Everybody loved her.
Bob adored Anne. Annie became the apple of her father's eye, and suddenly Annie, the baby, became the favorite child. Everybody in the family loved her.
The more attention Bob gave Annie, the harder he was on his 2 boys. Larry seemed to be able to turn the other cheek, but not Michael.
Michael had been getting into trouble more increasingly over the last year or so.
Michael began to have problems of a fairly serious nature. Tension between he and his father, tension between he and the other family members.
By 1980, Michael's rebellious nature pushed his parents to their breaking point.
One night, Michael asked to go out, and they said no. So he sneaked out. Went out with his buddies. When he came back home at about midnight, he pounds on the door. His mother comes to the door, looks at him and says, "No, we're not letting you in." He goes over to a neighbor's house, spends the night, goes to school the next day on his own. And while he's there, his parents had called social services, said we can't handle him anymore.
After 5 years of struggling with Michael, Bob and Kay were so concerned about his volatile behavior that they asked the state to place him with another family.
He never lived at home again.
It was just a very difficult situation. Bob and Kay loved him, but they felt there was nothing they could do for him.
While Bob and Kay tried to stay focused on Larry and Annie, Michael's state of mind seemed to deteriorate.
Michael had been in a reform school and he got in a fight and got in some trouble, so they sent him to a state mental hospital for evaluation. And that was just a few weeks before the murders. He was staying at this facility.
The Crownsville State Hospital Center was terrifying, faceless, institutional, decrepit buildings, straight out of a Stephen King nightmare.
Had Bob and Kay's rejection led Michael Schwartz to commit a cold-blooded murder? Detective Barr and his partner decide to make the short drive to Crownsville and ask Michael for themselves.
He was interrogated by these talented homicide detectives. Michael's denying.
Michael's words say one thing, but to the detectives, his appearance tells a different story.
They did notice it. Michael had very noticeable marks on his long neck, and he clearly had an injury of some kind there. But he said they were hickeys.
Detectives keep pushing, but Michael is adamant that he was at the hospital on the night of the murders, and the hospital records back up his claims.
We learned from the staff that their logs indicated that Michael had been there all evening.
He has what appears to be an ironclad alibi. I mean, he is in a locked ward in a state mental hospital.
The police weren't so sure. A lot of people weren't so sure. It was very lax at this Crownsville State facility. It's not a prison. It's just a hospital.
Detectives aren't completely convinced of Michael's alibi, but they don't have enough to arrest him either. And soon after that interview, Michael Schwartz lawyers up.
Of course, I finally got to him. I did what all defense lawyers do, which is to say, don't say a word to anybody about anything. He was never interrogated again.
Michael won't talk, and the lab has found no useful prints on the handle of the splitting maul. But detectives know one key piece of evidence from the crime scene that could tell them everything they need to know.
During the investigation, there was a bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door. We had examined both victims. Neither one had blood on the palms.
If detectives can prove Michael Schwartz left that print, they'll have their murderer. But that's easier said than done.
This evidence was difficult to analyze. We were very limited in 1984 with what we could do. This would involve the evidence being sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington.
Detectives investigating the savage double murder of Bob and Kay Schwartz are hoping one of their most promising pieces of evidence will help them catch the killer.
A bloody palm print was lifted and sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis. We knew that it would probably take a long time to get those results.
While the feds in Washington do their careful work, the shocking news of the murder spreads.
There was a tremendous uproar in the community about this murder. A couple were murdered in their own home. A crazed killer chasing a woman through the neighborhood. There was a lot of pressure to solve the case.
That pressure only mounts when detectives receive the coroner's report. It's a grim account of a seemingly psychotic attack.
The wounds to Mr. Schwartz numbered 17 in total, and in fact were lethal. Both his right and left carotid were severed during the attack.
On Kay Schwartz, the autopsy showed that she was stabbed 7 times around her neck area, but they were very light wounds, tentative. And then her skull was split, with a mall.
Detectives still haven't been able to locate the knife used in the attack, but the coroner's report does appear to confirm that they're on the right track.
According to the medical examiner, we had the right theory about how this may have occurred. Kay was stabbed in the basement, got up to flee. The killer would have chased Kay Schwartz as she ran from the neighborhood and into the woods, then back to the house where she was killed.
Is it possible Michael Schwartz eluded security at the Crownsville Mental Hospital and committed this crime? If so, detectives need to understand why.
I think it's fair to say there was tension in the house. Bob had a bit of a shorter fuse than Kay and had a little bit less willingness to be tolerant of some of the children's shortcomings.
Neighbors tell detectives a story they remember from a few years before, when Michael was still living with the Schwartzes.
Michael got in trouble for some sin, fighting on a school bus, something like that. And his father decided physical labor was what he needed. So he gave him this heavy wood splitting maul and said, take this stump out of the front yard, a dead tree stump. It was massive, a massive thing. There was no way Michael could get it. But he just swung it again and again and again.
Neighbors told us that Michael chopped at that tree every evening for up to 3 hours. And approaching a month later, the stump was still there. This boy had blisters on his hands.
Michael was seething and getting more and more angry. Everybody said Michael had threatened to kill his parents.
Could the maul that was used to teach Michael Schwartz a lesson have been the same one that ended Kay's life?
Michael told his mother, Kay, that I could walk up to Bob and stick a knife in his back, kill him, and no results would befall me because I'm a juvenile. The logical assumption on all of our parts was Michael had made good on his threat. He had said he would do it, and now he's done it.
"4 days after they were found brutally murdered, Bob and Kay are laid to rest.
The funeral, I had replays of having moments with them. I always admired them. Like, why would somebody kill them?
The couple's obedient children, Larry and Annie Schwartz, have been staying with friends of the family, while their brother still resides at Crownsville.
Michael Schwartz was allowed out of the hospital to come to the funeral, and at the cemetery, both boys stood over the grave and shook holy water, one into Kay's grave, the other into Bob's grave. Off to one side, the two detectives on the case stood in their suits with their sunglasses in the cemetery.
Everyone gathered around, gave them their support. But most people believed it was Michael who had done it.
Many note the suspicious red marks still visible on Michael's neck. Talk spreads through the community.
The newspapers were saying that Michael was a suspect. But even though he was in Crownsville at the time, there was some question about the accountability there, and maybe he could have gotten away and done it.
With lingering concerns over Michael's alibi and the security at Crownsville, detectives decide there's only one way to find the truth once and for all.
Wanting to make sure that we had crossed every T and dotted every I, my partner and I decided that we were going to follow up and visit that mental hospital again. We wanted to make sure that it was impossible that Michael would never have been able to leave undetected. So we asked the staff to lock us in the ward where Michael was committed. If Michael could have gotten out of that, there was a chance Michael had done it.
Detectives are about to put Michael Schwartz's alibi to the test by locking themselves in the room where he stayed at the Crownsville Mental Hospital.
If he had killed his parents, Michael would have had to leave undetected, return, and get back in without someone discovering that. And we went through every door and every window, and there was no possible way we could have gotten out of that without help. So it was very convincing to us that Michael was not at the scene of the murder. Michael's been eliminated as a suspect.
It's good news for Michael, but a setback for detectives. The young man was their strongest lead. Undaunted, investigators reach out to the public, hoping to cast a much wider net.
As we conducted our investigation, we methodically went through a list of possible persons that may have intended harm to the Schwartzes. We started a hotline for people to call in tips, and we got phone calls from various neighbors and acquaintances.
One of the many calls that come in immediately piques the detectives' interest.
Persons we interviewed told us that Bob steadfastly picketed an abortion clinic in Annapolis for 4 years, never missed a Saturday. And he would approach women entering the abortion clinic and attempt to change their mind about what they were going to do.
He would intensely try to dissuade women from coming into the clinic. He would get up in their faces.
Detectives confirm that a few of those women filed police reports against Bob, so they begin interviewing every complainant and witness connected with those reports.
The police were called on several occasions by the clinic. Bob was never arrested, but he caused the abortion clinic a lot of grief.
Could the killer be someone Bob confronted, or someone with a grudge against Kay?
Kay was a school teacher at Broadneck High School.
In her classroom, she was known for laissez-faire, not a strict disciplinarian.
According to witnesses, Kay was well-liked in school. She was an easygoing teacher.
Detectives pursue every credible tip that comes in.
Our investigation revealed that there was no evidence that anyone would have a vendetta against her. In fact, there was no motive that we could establish where anyone would have been that angry or vengeful to want to kill either of them.
"8 days after the brutal double murder, investigators have hit a wall. With no fingerprints on the splitting mall and their single most promising piece of evidence still under analysis, detectives are all out of options. Undaunted, they decide to start fresh, poring over every piece of evidence they do have, starting at the very beginning.
Colorado County Police. My sister's coming to my house. Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yes.
This time, investigators hone in on something they didn't notice before.
When I listened to the 911 call, Larry Schwartz said, "My parents are dead."
My parents are dead.
However, he told the first police officer on the scene that he hadn't gone downstairs. His father was in the basement. At that point, he was only known that his mother was dead, not his father. So there's an inconsistency there. It didn't make sense.
The discovery leads Detective Barr to take a harder look at Larry's version of events, and he finds several contradictions.
For example, Larry telling us that he saw his mother's body from the window. Yet I looked out the dining room window and couldn't see her body. I thought perhaps he was confused and meant to say the kitchen window, which turned out to be even worse. I climbed on the kitchen counter and looked out the window and still couldn't see her body.
Detective Barr had chalked it up to the extreme shock the boy had suffered that morning.
Larry's demeanor wasn't unusual at the time. Various people react differently under stress. He could have very well been in shock, repressing his feelings. I didn't know.
Barr wants to give Larry a chance to clear up his story. But that isn't going to happen.
Larry had gotten an attorney. The attorney had advised him not to talk to us.
At last, word comes in from the FBI. Test results on their key piece of evidence from the crime scene. The bloody palm print on the sliding glass door. The one detectives believed was made by the killer.
It came back. Finally, we could find out who it could possibly belong to, what we were dealing with.
Coming up, it's a twist that no one saw coming.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right.
Detectives working to catch Bob and Kay Schwartz's killer finally had the results of their key piece of crime scene evidence from the FBI's forensic lab in Washington, D.C.
I was notified by the FBI laboratory that they had positively identified the bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door.
The results confirm what detectives believed months earlier. The palm print belongs to one of Bob and Kay's own children, but not the child they suspected.
It came back belonging to Larry Schwartz. At that point, the state's attorney for Anne Arundel County authorized an arrest warrant be obtained for Larry Schwartz.
Authorities charged young Schwartz as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When the news gets out, it causes an uproar in Cape St. Clair. Michael Schwartz was known as the bad kid in the family, not handsome, likable Larry.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right. I didn't have a single suspicion.
It was very difficult to accept that Larry had that type of violence within him.
Larry was seen as this model, mild-mannered son. Nobody in a million years would have expected him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
The community was in denial. The majority of them were convinced that Michael Schwartz had done this. There was certainly a lot of speculation about whether we had the right person or not.
It was very hard for people to believe that he could have done it. I think that they just felt there was more to this. There was more going on than any of us could understand.
Why would a docile youth, beloved by everybody, explode in a rage and stab both his parents? Why? Everybody wanted to know the answer.
Authorities want answers too. But Larry, at the direction of the defense team hired by concerned family friends, is not talking and has neither admitted nor denied guilt. So for the next 15 months, while Larry waits it out in jail, detectives spend every waking moment trying to build an airtight case.
We lacked a confession. The state's attorney for Anne Arundel County had me reassigned to his office to work exclusively on this case. We had to make sure that we had every piece of evidence we could get to close this case.
Without Larry's confession, detectives need to find out what led this soft-spoken boy to such violent extremes.
I continued to interview people, collect statements.
Investigators soon realized that Michael wasn't the only son who had a hard time at home.
I believe that Larry was under tremendous pressure. He was repeatedly chastised for the poor grades. He was restricted from leaving the yard.
I think it was more of a protection thing. You're trying to keep him away from the wrong crowd, and I think Larry could have been pulled in many ways. I think they were afraid of that.
I believe personally that he was angry. He was frustrated. It was cumulative, that he was holding rage inside him, and whatever may have happened that night set him off.
But some speculated that there was another reason why Larry turned on his parents.
Michael kept contact with Larry. He changed Larry's view of the family, and in a negative way. He was telling him that they just got rid of me, they want nothing to do with me, you know. Larry, he didn't want to be left like that. He didn't want to go into foster home again.
Larry was extremely worried that what happened to Michael would happen to him.
Then it changed where he was afraid he was going to be put out.
Despite what may have led to this violent act, 17-year-old Larry Swartz is about to be tried for first-degree murder.
15 months after the crimes, the prosecutor had witnesses ready to line up, psychiatric witnesses who said Larry was sane, and he knew what he was doing, and he actually planned it. And they had a case to present that showed premeditated, cold-blooded murder.
Larry Swartz looked unconcerned as he arrived this morning from the county jail where he had spent the last 15 months.
More than 60 witnesses have been subpoenaed to testify at Larry Swartz's trial, which is expected to last 2 weeks.
I was at the courthouse expecting a trial. There was no trial. Nobody expected anything like this to happen. It was shocking.
After detectives and prosecutors have labored more than a year preparing their case against Larry Swartz for the murder of his parents, a last-minute maneuver by Swartz's legal team has brought everything to an unexpected, screeching halt. The trial is called off.
Larry had confessed to his attorneys.
He broke down. He broke down sobbing and heaving, and he said he did it, he was guilty, and he just killed them.
Finally, authorities have their confession, leaving behind any doubt of Larry's guilt.
Ultimately, the expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Now, the state's attorney's office has to decide what punishment could possibly fit this crime.
The state agreed to a plea of second-degree murder.
The prosecutor recommended a 20-year sentence with all but 12 suspended. The judge agreed to make it concurrent as opposed to consecutive. I've never seen a case that lenient.
The state's attorney wanted me to take Larry to the confinement facility. He knew that if I took Larry, there was a potential for Larry to tell me why he did this and how did it really occur. And I sat down with him and asked him to tell us, Larry, why did you do it? He didn't answer me. And I pressed him again, and he said, I just lost it. He said that he had come home from school that day, and later in the evening, his mother had asked him how he had done on his tests. And he knew that he had failed Spanish, and she had been writing him about not doing well in school. And she made a caustic remark about his grades, you probably failed them, meaning the tests. So he took a knife and he stabbed her repeatedly about the neck. And then Bob was alerted to the activity, the noise, and he attacked Bob. Larry never did explain or admit to chasing Kay through the neighborhood. I found out during the autopsy that she had been stabbed through her esophagus, so perhaps she couldn't scream. With sheer terror, running for her life, Larry did admit to putting the splitting maul into his mother's head.
After committing such a violent act, Larry knew there was only one way to cast off suspicion.
County Police.
It came the realization that throughout the interview with Larry, he was trying to steer our investigation. He force-fed us information about Michael.
The whole time that his brother Michael was a suspect in the killings, Larry played the victim card.
When we were here for the funeral, Larry wanted to hang out with us, essentially, which we were perfectly prepared to do, not believing for a minute that he was involved. We viewed him as a victim, a kid who didn't have any parents at this point in time. It's, to this day, hard to fathom.
Though Larry's adoptive brother Michael had been exonerated, he nonetheless met with a tragic end.
When it turned out that he didn't commit the murders, he had nowhere to go. His parents are dead. His brother's in prison. His sister's been adopted by another family, and he has no one in the world. He starts doing drugs, and while he's taking drugs, he and his buddies go rob a man, and in the course of robbing the man, they stabbed him to death. Michael is sentenced to prison for life. None of the leniency his brother got. Life. He's now in his 50s, still in prison in the state of Maryland, 35 years later.
This just had to be one of the worst lose-lose destructive situations that society can see happen.
Looking back over this case, I have empathy for both Michael and Larry. I know that they struggled, yet the parents still tried to do the right thing.
Kay and Bob had adopted children who had been through a lot of bad times. And so I think they were trying to heal the wounds that they came to the family with.
For both Michael and Larry, I could understand the frustration, the anger, but I couldn't understand the murder. That's the part I didn't understand.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to 𝐔𝐧𝐞𝐈.com.
A college student with a bright future.
He was a journalism and history major who planned to go to law school.
He had a huge social group. He was very well liked.
Is found murdered in the middle of town.
The wound was so deep, the blade of the knife nicked the spine.
Sending police hunting for an elusive killer.
This case was a true mystery, a true whodunit.
He was depicted as a promiscuous young man who could have been killed by anybody.
And when they catch him, it leaves everyone blindsided.
They did not want to believe this was true.
And that was pretty surprising.
When we figured out who did it, I refused to believe it.
Columbia, Missouri is best known as the home of the University of Missouri.
I think many people would consider us a college town. This is a city, small city with 30,000 students, coming in.
For the Columbia Police Department, a neighborhood of rowdy kids is usually as bad as it gets.
Mainly a lot of college-related crimes, such as the parties and alcohol offenses. Homicides in general were unheard of.
That all changes one afternoon in June 2004.
I received a call that someone had found a body in the East Campus area, and because I'm the East District Commander, I headed towards the scene.
Schwartz arrives to find a team of officers already securing the area.
body was in between two apartments, lying face up. And he only had boxer shorts on. His throat had been slit, most probably with a knife. It was a very large and gaping wound. It was very deep. There's a few other abrasions on the upper body. So it was a very violent action, just a very violent crime.
I was a student in college, and seeing this in a place I knew really well was tough.
The forensics team processes the scene while police search the area carefully, but they can't locate a murder weapon or ID on the body.
We started talking with people in the area to see if anyone knew this particular person.
This was a part of town where everybody really knows everybody else. Everybody knows everybody else's business.
One onlooker thinks they recognize the dead young man.
The body was identified as Jesse Valencia. He was a young man attending the University of Missouri, and we found out that he lived in the neighborhood, block and a half from where we found his body.
The 23-year-old lived alone in an apartment just off campus. Police need to know if that's where the crime got its start.
We opened it up and started to look for any initial type evidence, trying to figure out who could have done this and for what reason.
The forensic team does a thorough sweep of the apartment, bagging Jesse's cell phone, cigarettes, and other items, while police canvass neighbors to see if they noticed anything suspicious the night before.
His neighbor admitted coming home drunk about 3 in the morning and going to bed. He was awakened by yelling that was going on next door. This neighbor actually pounded on the door and then went back to sleep.
The neighbor recalls that the shouting was late, almost 4 o'clock in the morning. Police are curious who was in the apartment with Jesse and what could they have been arguing about.
That obviously started to help us narrow down the time frame of when this may have occurred, but that's all we had to work with at that point.
There were no real clues as to who had murdered this young man.
A few hours into the investigation, another young man arrives at the scene in a flood of tears.
This guy named Jack Berry told investigators he was Jesse's former boyfriend who just lived a few blocks away. A friend had called Jack Berry saying that Jesse was dead.
If he had a relationship with Jesse Valencia, he was definitely a person the detectives wanted to talk to.
Jack agrees to come down to the station for routine questioning. But first, he helps detectives track down Jesse's family in Kentucky.
They called me on the phone, and a detective told me that Jesse had been killed, and I pretty much just took off running through the house and ran out my front door screaming. Just too much. Even when he was a little boy, Jesse never had trouble making friends. Everybody wanted to be around him because he was constantly smiling, laughing, and Jesse told me he was gay when he was 10 years old. He started crying, he got pretty emotional, and he said that he was afraid that I was gonna hate him. And I told him that there was nothing in the world that could make me hate him. After that, he seemed pretty comfortable with himself.
As a teen, Jesse's confidence bloomed.
Jesse loved to talk. He loved meeting new people, making new friends. When he was in high school, he wanted to try modeling. He did really well at it, and I always thought that he wouldn't go back to school, but a year from the date that he told us that he wanted to be a model, he said he wanted to be a lawyer. That's what he decided to do, and that's why he went to Missouri.
Linda said he was a journalism and history major who planned to go to law school.
Jesse Valencia was one of those larger-than-life characters. He had such a big personality. He had a lot of friends. He had a huge social group.
Now, detectives need to find out who cut Jesse's life short in such a horrific way. They start by asking Jack Barry about his relationship with Jesse.
Jack told them he and Jesse had just split up, and he was trying to make Jesse realize it's over. I need to move on. Jesse still loved Jack, so he was having a hard time letting go. But Jack was already starting to see someone else.
Was it a fight with a spurned lover that the neighbor had heard in the middle of the night?
It was possible Jack had some type of confrontation with Jesse that led to his death.
And when investigators asked Jack for an alibi, it turns out that he doesn't seem to have one.
His alibi was, I was home sleeping alone. At that point, Jack Barry had become the primary suspect.
Coming up, detectives discover a secret romance
They had started a relationship very quickly.
that uncovers a killer's trail
A lie is the next best thing to a confession.
to a surprising culprit.
It was shocking on many levels.
Detectives in Columbia, Missouri are questioning a man who had recently split up with murdered college student Jesse Valencia.
Jack Barry wanted to end the relationship. He wasn't happy with the relationship any longer.
Jack paints a picture of a couple growing apart after 2 years of dating. But a piece of evidence found at Jesse's apartment makes detectives question his story.
The investigating detectives found Jesse's cell phone, and the cell phone showed that Jesse had called Jack Barry at about 3:18 that night.
The neighbors had heard some type of an argument from the victim's apartment, approximately the time frame of when this occurred. So that would be obviously suspicious.
But Jack insists he was nowhere near Jesse's apartment.
Jack said that he had already gone to bed that night and that he heard a knock on his door at 3:18 in the morning, and then he simultaneously got a phone call from Jesse's cell phone. It was routine that Jesse would use his cell phone as sort of a doorbell. Jack said he was tired and he really didn't feel like getting up and talking to his former boyfriend at 3:18 in the morning, so he didn't go to the door.
Jack says he rolled over and went back to sleep. But police aren't so sure and question him for hours.
Finally, Jack broke into tears, and he said he regretted that. He didn't go to the door because what happened might not have happened had he done that. His reaction was so genuine, and it was clear that Jack still had a lot of love and affection for Jesse.
And it's becoming clear to detectives that Jack didn't kill Jesse, but they press him to see if he might know who did.
Jack said that he had no clue as to what would have happened to him and why anyone would have killed him.
23-year-old Jesse Valencia, the MU student.
Police found Valencia's body on East Campus, throat slashed.
As the story of the murder hits the 11 o'clock news, it sends shockwaves through the city.
I would say this was probably one of the most gruesome killings in Columbia. We don't have very many murders here.
The murder of a gay young man just a week before the city's first Pride Fest horrifies the progressive college community.
For anyone who thinks that they can get away with something like this so heinous is just unthinkable. We know from past homicides that a majority of them are with people that they know. Anyone who had had contact with him, whether in a sexual relationship or a social relationship, the detectives wanted to talk to.
Police begin to make the rounds of Jesse's wide circle of friends, wondering if there's anyone in his life that might have harbored any kind of grudge. One name they hear over and over is 𝐔𝐬𝐿𝐥𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿, a student that Jesse had met 2 weeks earlier at a political rally.
Jesse's friends had said, oh, maybe it was this guy because he didn't seem quite normal. There was something that made him a little bit different from other people.
Several of Jesse's friends, they said that Zev wasn't comfortable in his own skin and that he had a lot of issues with being himself. There was some contention whether Zev and Jesse were having a romantic relationship. They were spending a lot of time together.
Rumors about the two young men had been swirling, and after Jesse was murdered, the gossip about Zev began to take a sinister tone.
Somebody saw someone matching his description, looking disheveled and crying, walking down the street the morning of the murder, and a car he was known to drive was seen in that area.
That's when the detectives started looking towards him and started talking with him and seeing what he had to say.
Detectives call Zev down to the station, but he denies that the rumors about him and Jesse are true.
Zev said they'd never had a sexual relationship, but they were friends. Then Zev would come over and he'd hang out with him.
Police questioned Zev about where he was between 3 and 5 a.m.
His alibi was, I was home sleeping. He was a young man who still lived with his parents.
They subject Zev to a voice stress analysis test to see if he is telling the truth.
It showed untruthful, so deceitful. That did seem to be some evidence of guilt.
Detectives quickly follow up with a visit to his parents, but they confirm that their son was home all night.
Zev's parents had said that when Zev would leave, he would always go through the garage door to get to the car, and so it made a big racket. They would have awakened his parents, and they said there's no way that he would have left that night. It seemed like he did have an alibi.
With 𝐔𝐬𝐿𝐥𝐿𝐿𝐿 discounted as a suspect, detectives continue to piece together the last hours of Jesse Valencia's life.
The detectives were talking with several of the friends of Jesse Valencia to see where he was on the evening and early morning hours that this occurred.
Police learned that Jesse had gone to a party at a friend's house around 11 p.m. on the night he was killed.
Some friends of Jesse said that Friday night, Jesse was at a party with a young man named Ed McDevitt.
Ed McDevitt was somebody Jesse had just met. Ed was a chef in town. They had met just a couple of nights before and had started a relationship very quickly.
Jesse's friends tell police that the two men left the party together, heading in the direction of Jesse's house.
And that was around 3 o'clock in the morning on the last night of Jesse's life.
It appears as though Ed McDevitt might have been the last person to see Jesse alive.
And it was possible Ed McDevitt went home with Jesse and then killed him.
"12 hours after finding Jesse Valencia's body, detectives track down 22-year-old Ed McDevitt and bring him down to the station.
Jesse had met Ed McDevitt 2 days before his death, and invited Ed to come home with him on that Friday night, the last night of Jesse's life, so he became a suspect at that point.
But Ed claims that he and Jesse went their separate ways soon after they left the party.
And he was talking with Jesse on the phone at the time he was walking home on the last night of Jesse's life.
Ed says that his roommate was up when he arrived home and invites detectives over to talk to him themselves.
There's nothing found when they searched his home, and everything Ed McDevitt told the officers, they could verify by looking at his cell phone records, by talking to his roommate, and at that point, investigators let him go.
Police hope that DNA results pending at the lab will help them link one of their suspects to Jesse's murder. Desperate for answers, Jesse's mom grows more despondent, recalling an eerie premonition Jesse had years ago.
From the time Jesse was 7 years old, he had told me that he was going to die at a young age. He said, "I'm going to die at a young age, and I love all of you, and I always will love you, but I'll be okay." He would always end it with, "I'll be okay." And of course I got emotional and upset over it, but he said, "We've got to make the most of what time I'm here."
A day after Jesse's murder, detectives receive the autopsy report and study it closely for clues.
The medical examiner concluded that Jesse had been murdered in the area of 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. The cut to his neck was the only knife wound, and it was the cause of death. And it was so deep, the blade of the knife had also nicked the spine.
The lack of defense wounds suggests that Jesse had been taken by surprise.
The most mysterious thing was that across his breastbone there were bruises, and in the middle of his back between his shoulder blade there were bruises.
The evidence suggests that Jesse was easily overpowered in the vicious attack. Investigators hope that additional lab work will reveal even more and point to a killer.
There were fingernail scrapings collected during the autopsy, and also some hairs were found on his chest, and that was sent to the crime lab for analysis.
Until the crime lab turns up DNA, police have no choice but to move on to their next lead.
A lot of Jesse's friends were being brought in, they were giving evidence, they were helping out with information.
One of those friends is a fellow student named Andy.
Andy Schermerhorn was a young man who had what they called a friends with benefits arrangement with Jesse.
Andy was out of town the night Jesse was killed, but the day after the murder, he comes forward to share a shocking story.
Andy Schermerhorn told the investigating detectives that Jesse was having sex with a Columbia police officer.
He was having a relationship with an officer. I was surprised.
Andy nervously reveals an encounter 3 weeks prior at Jesse's apartment.
Andy Schermerhorn said that on May 14th, he had been at Jesse's home at night, and there was a knock at the door. Jesse went to the door, and a uniformed police officer was there. And Jesse said, "It's okay, oh, it's okay, he's cool, he's cool."
According to Andy, the officer took off his gun belt, and the next thing Andy knew, the three of them were fooling around.
After it was over, the police officer said, "This has got to be a secret."
A secret affair between an officer and a murder victim is a major red flag.
If any one of our officers had been seeing Jessie Valencia, why is he not being forthcoming? If you have nothing to hide, why not just tell us?
Detectives need to know who this officer is.
They said, "Do you think you'd be able to recognize him if you saw him again?" And he said yes, because it had only been about 2 weeks since that incident.
Detectives ask Andy if he'll look through a book containing the photo of every officer in the Columbia Police Department.
They were having him walk down the hall where he was going to look at the yearbook. Andy Schermerhorn flipped through it without even looking at the pages, closed it, and Schermerhorn began trembling, and he said, "I passed him in the hallway just now. It was him."
The day after the murder of Jessie Valencia, detectives in Columbia, Missouri learned that he was allegedly having a relationship with a local police officer.
Jessie's friend, Andy Schermerhorn, told the investigating detectives that he was an eyewitness to this sexual activity. Schermerhorn began trembling, and he said, "It was him that I passed in the hallway just now." And that was Stephen Arthur Rios.
Stephen Rios' commander believes Andy must be mistaken about the officer's identity.
When the detectives told me that maybe Steve had been having a relationship with the victim, I told the detectives, "You're absolutely wrong. He was married to a wonderful young lady, and they had just had their first child."
Schwartz knows the 27-year-old Rios well. The 5-year veteran is one of the department's rising young stars.
Steve was very outgoing. He communicated well, very ambitious.
He was a young officer who was on his way up in the department because he was a go-getter and a very popular officer.
Detectives don't know if Andy is telling the truth, but they're certainly anxious to get Rios' side of the story.
If he was having a relationship, that does not mean that he had killed Jessie Valencia.
Rios is out of town for a couple of days on a camping trip with coworkers. So they begin tracing Rios' steps the day Jessie's body was found.
He went in for his work shift later in the afternoon, like he normally did, and at that point, the body had been found.
The sergeant on duty that day had told me that Rios was coming to the scene to help identify the body. He had contacted the on-duty sergeant, but said he could help.
Rios said that I met Jessie Valencia when I gave him a ticket back on April 18th.
Investigators pull a copy of the incident report to see if it backs up Rios' story.
April 18th of 2004, some friends of Jessie's were having a party, and the party kept getting loud, and the police showed up to get them to quiet down. And Jessie, this intelligent pre-law major, said, "What's your probable cause?" Well, that got him arrested, and Stephen Rios gave him a municipal court summons for obstructing a governmental operation.
A call to Jessie's mother corroborates the report.
Jessie told me that when he was arrested, that the cop that drove him down to the jail was really nice and that he talked to him all the way down to the station. And he said, I kind of felt a little bit uncomfortable because he kept asking me personal questions about my life that I didn't really feel like he should be asking me when he was trying to arrest me for something.
But the arrest wasn't the end of the officer's interest. The very next day, he turned up at Jessie's apartment.
After he got arrested, Jesse called me on the phone and he said, the cop that arrested me last night showed up on my doorstep. He said he had to ask me some more questions. but the questions he was asking Jesse were more of a personal nature. They went out a few times after that, and he would come to Jesse's apartment and just show up unannounced, even when he was in uniform.
Linda doesn't know much more than that, but thinks that Jesse's friend Joan Sheridan might. When they track her down 2 days after the murder, Joan confirms that Jesse saw the officer more than once after the arrest.
He had told her that the officer would typically come by sometime after 3 o'clock and before 6 o'clock in the morning, just for sex, and then leave.
Joan reveals that she got a close-up look at the officer one night when he showed up at Jesse's place.
They showed her a photo lineup, and she was able to pick the person that came by to Jesse's apartment that night. And it was Stephen Rios.
Detectives now have more evidence that Rios was having a scandalous relationship with Jesse. And when they hear what Joan says next, they suspect he may also have a motive for murder.
Joan said that when he went to court for his municipal court summons, Jesse assumed it would be dismissed since he was having sex with the arresting officer, and it had not been dismissed, and that had angered Jesse. So Jesse had told Joan that the next time the police officer comes over, I'm going to tell him that I have a little secret the chief of police might want to know if he doesn't get that ticket dismissed.
The detectives called me and told me that Jesse was threatening to contact the chief and expose Rios. Finally, the light bulb went off. You start looking at who had a motive to kill Jesse Valencia. Rios was very worried about his job. He was very worried about his reputation. He would be very devastated. He would be embarrassed by this information coming out.
That's when Rios became the suspect.
It's a serious matter to accuse one of their own. Investigators quickly regroup to plan the best approach.
They didn't feel they were ready to interview him yet. They were wanting to have the DNA evidence come back before they actually confronted him. But all of a sudden, Rios showed up at the police department and said, could I talk to you for a second?
He had this look on his face, like he was very upset. Very upset.
Coming up, detectives get a devastating phone call.
Steve called me, crying, very upset, and he said, I've done a bad thing.
And the investigation takes an unexpected new turn.
The officers found him on the 4th floor of a parking garage.
What was he thinking?
Detectives investigating the murder of college student Jesse Valencia are preparing to confront their suspect, police officer Stephen Rios. But Rios goes on the offensive first.
Rios said he was hearing from other people that Jesse was having an affair with a Columbia police officer. And I just wanted you to know that I did give him a ticket, but that's the only contact I had with him, and it's certainly not me.
But detectives tell him flat out that they've heard a different story.
They said, we've talked to a woman who said that she was at Jesse's apartment one night when you showed up. Rios sat there for a minute, and then Rios said, well, you know what, we did become social friends, but it never became anything like a sexual relationship. They said, you know, we've talked to another young man who says he was actually having sex with Jesse, and you came by that night and actually came in and joined them on the bed. And Rios said, what, sex? Like it was the most astounding and false accusation you could ever heard.
He was getting very agitated with the detectives. He's a very prideful person, and he was very upset because they didn't believe him.
It's easy to see that Rios is lying. Detectives bear down hard. And finally, their suspect breaks.
Finally, Rios admitted that he had sex with Jessie. He tried to claim it was just that one time, and then it evolved into that he had had sex with Jessie as many as 6 times.
It's a stunning admission and a strong motive for murder.
He was embarrassed. He obviously did not want this information out if he was keeping it a secret to begin with, especially from his wife, you know, in his family.
Police may not have the physical evidence to prove that Rios is a killer, but they do have something that's almost as good.
We were able to prove that he was lying.
There's an old saying in law enforcement that a lie, a provable lie, is the next best thing to a confession. And Stephen Rios was caught in lots of provable lies.
But detectives aren't finished interrogating their suspect. They ask for his whereabouts the night that Jessie was killed.
He said he had been at work and he got off at 3 o'clock in the morning like he normally did. And he said that that night he'd gone onto the rooftop of the parking garage with a few other officers, and they had drank a few beers before they went home. And he said he got home about 5:15 to 5:30, took a shower, and got in bed.
Detectives grill Rios for over 3 hours, looking for any cracks in his story.
He still maintained he'd had nothing to do with Jessie's death. At that point, investigators let him go. He was definitely a suspect, but the question remained, can we prove it beyond a reasonable doubt?
Investigators' next step is to create a timeline for the night of Jessie's murder and see how Rios' alibi fits in.
His wife corroborated that he had gotten home in that 5:15 to 5:30 time frame.
Other officers confirm Rios worked until 3 a.m. and then had some drinks with them on the rooftop that night. The security door records reveal that Rios left the roof at 4:37 a.m., 45 minutes before he got home.
One of the detectives actually drove from the parking garage to Jessie's home the same time of night, and it was 3.5 minutes. He then drove from the scene of the murder to Rios' home, and it was 10 minutes.
This gave a window of time of 20 to 30 minutes that were potentially unaccounted for at the time that Jessie Valencia was apparently killed.
And this gave us a timeline that could show that Rios could have done this murder within that time.
Investigators search Rios' home, car, and work locker, but they uncover nothing to tie him to the crime. Then, out of the blue, Captain Schwartz receives an alarming phone call.
Steve called me crying, very upset, and he said, I've done a bad thing. The first question I asked him was, where are you? And he said that he was in Kansas City and that he had bought a shotgun. I really thought he was going to kill himself. And my first reaction was no. I said, you need to just stop what you're doing. Just come back. Just come back to Columbia and we'll get through it.
Captain Schwartz is able to talk Rios into driving the 150 miles back home, where police take him into custody.
He still wasn't under arrest, but he was put on a 96-hour hold for an involuntary commitment to a mental facility, just for observation to make sure that he wouldn't kill himself.
But Stephen Rios is still despondent. He manages to evade hospital security, and soon the entire Columbia police force is on alert.
I got a phone call that Steve had escaped and was on top of the parking garage, threatening suicide.
One of the officers found him on the 4th floor of a parking garage, and Rios climbed up on the wall, claiming he was going to jump.
When they called me and said he's on top of the garage, he's threatening suicide, what was he doing? What was he thinking?
Police officer Steven Rios, a suspect in the murder of Jessie Valencia, has escaped protective custody and is threatening to lead to his death.
This is one of the busiest parts of campus. It's about 7 o'clock at night. He goes to the roof of the parking garage, starts threatening to jump.
There's a crowd below. There are people watching this. People are videotaping this, taking pictures. It's bizarre.
Police arrive on the scene to try to talk Rios off the ledge.
All I could think of was, here we go again. Why are you putting everyone through this? It was just putting everyone through a nightmare.
After a tense 45-minute standoff, they finally managed to talk Rios back from the brink.
He was taken back into custody and again put into a mental facility and put on a suicide watch while we were finishing our investigation to determine whether or not he would be charged with Jessie's murder.
3 weeks after Jessie's murder, the analysis of the hairs found on Jessie's chest give police the evidence they need to charge Rios with the crime.
They were able to say the persons who left those hairs on Jessie's chest, limb hairs that would have come from somebody's arm, those hairs matched to Steven Rios. And that's when we realized that they teach Columbia police officers at the training academy how to administer a chokehold, and that cuts off the blood flow to the brain and renders a person unconscious in 3 to 8 seconds. That could account for these limb hairs, in addition to the bruises that went across the front of his chest and in the middle of his back.
On July 1st, 26 days after Jessie Valencia's body was found, Stephen Arthur Rios is arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Did you kill Jessie Valencia?
No, I did not.
During the week-long trial, prosecutors lay out their theory of how the murder went down.
Rios came by after his shift was over, thinking they were going to have sex. Jessie confronted him.
Jessie was threatening to contact the chief and expose Rios.
And he knew his career and his happy marriage would probably be over. And that had angered Rios. The neighbor heard this argument going on, and Jessie's yelling, "Stop it, stop it." Jessie, then clad only in his shorts and barefoot, ran out, being chased by Steven Rios. The Steven Rios caught him from behind and choked him into unconsciousness, put him on the ground, cut his throat, and that's what I believe happened in the last minutes of Jessie Valencia's life.
Prosecutors know they have a strong case, but convincing a jury that a police officer is a murderer is sure to be a hard sell.
If even one of the 12 jurors feels like it's not the person, then you have a hung jury or a not guilty verdict.
After 8 long hours, the jury returns with a verdict.
The jury finds the defendant, Stephen Arthur Rios, guilty of murder in the second degree.
I did feel a great sense of relief and even pride when the case was over and Steven Rios had not gotten away with murder.
Stephen Arthur Rios receives a sentence of life in prison for the slaying of Jessie Valencia.
I don't feel like that Jesse really got justice because I wanted the death penalty for him. He took my whole life away from me.
Anytime you have an officer who has done a heinous type act like this and taken someone's life, it is a huge stain. And for law enforcement everywhere.
For Jesse's mother, her son's legacy is in the way he lived his life, not the way it ended.
I want people to remember the Jesse that was constantly laughing and trying to make other people happy, because that's what Jesse lived for. He didn't want anybody to be sad. There's always the empty space. Everybody still misses him, and we talk about him daily.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to 𝐔𝐧𝐞𝐿.com. A young mother on the verge of a new beginning.
She always used to talk about her wedding. She had everything planned out.
She was gonna be living the life that she's always dreamt of having.
Violently struck down.
Not just homicide, but an act of rage.
I had no idea why somebody would want to do that.
Police chase a deranged killer down a sinister path.
He was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. Someone burnt the house down.
Through a maze of twisted theories.
Maybe this was a retaliation.
That was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
Until the case takes a mind-bending turn.
He looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong."
That person never was on our radar.
Just an epic tragedy.
I was almost in disbelief.
That's just something that was entirely unexpected from the beginning.
Until we try to rule them in or rule them out, I don't know that any of us are safe.
On Sunday, August 10th, 2014, in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Jackson, Michigan, a quiet morning is broken by a desperate phone call.
Our dispatch did receive a 911 call from a panicked individual.
911.
Yeah, I need somebody up to my house right now. Well, she has it. I think she's dead.
Okay, so has she been sick?
No, there's blood everywhere.
Do you know where it's coming from?
I don't know.
Okay, can you tell if she's breathing?
She's not. She's cold. She's dead. Oh my God.
Police race to the home just before 11 a.m., where they're greeted by the caller and 3 young girls.
He had said that the deceased body was up in a bedroom upstairs. There was 2 bedrooms that we walked past, which were bedrooms where the kids had been sleeping.
With the 3 children who lived there safely out of the house and the crime scene locked down, detectives come upon a grisly sight.
As we enter the bedroom, then we do see the body. It was slumped down between the bed and the wall. And there was quite a bit of blood. At that point, we see zip ties on her hands, and we see what appears to be several stab marks.
A zip tie was wrapped around each wrist, with another looped through it and cut, as though she'd been strapped to the bed and then cut loose.
We, at that point, determined we likely had a homicide.
The police talk to Eric Wolf, who placed the 911 call. He tells them the victim is his fiancée, 28-year-old Frances Craig. He also makes a startling admission.
He said that he had worked all night, so when he came home, after finding Franny in the condition she was in, he then went downstairs and slept on the recliner chair. For whatever reason, he did not call 911 until a couple hours later in the morning.
Francis's 2 daughters and Eric's little girl were all in the house at the time. While Eric slept, his 10-year-old child walked into a horrifying scene.
Eric's daughter, Lexi, went into the bedroom and clearly could tell that something was amiss. She even touched her and could tell that she was not moving. I think she might even have described her as a little cold.
Lexi went downstairs and woke up her father. And that's when he finally called 911.
We all felt that a normal, average individual would, at the bare minimum, make sure their fiance, the person they're about to get married to and spend the rest of their life with, is okay.
Eric's decision to walk away from the murder scene is a red flag for investigators. And so is his casual demeanor.
When Eric was interviewed by one of the other detectives at the scene initially, the detective said he didn't seem too concerned, didn't seem too upset about what had happened.
Detectives plan to grill Eric about his suspicious behavior. But first, they need to finish processing the crime scene.
There was approximately 90 stab wounds, and they were in a very aggressive manner.
It was overkill. Not just committing a homicide, but an act of rage where it's over the top.
The rule of thumb is on a situation where there's multiple, and I'm talking more than a dozen stab wounds, it's usually a crime of passion. So at that point, you typically look at somebody close to the victim.
Investigators sift through the bloody mess for clues. There's no sign of a murder weapon, but plenty of signs of conflict.
The crime lab, which is the CSI people, they responded to the scene. They were there for multiple hours, collecting a ton of evidence.
While the forensics team works the scene inside. Shocked friends and family have gathered outside the house.
I didn't believe her. I thought it was a lie. It's not real. It didn't happen. I had no idea why somebody would want to do that. Francis was just an amazing person all around. Francis and I worked together. We hung out outside of work together. We would hang out with our kids.
Investigators learned that Francis had 2 daughters with an ex-boyfriend. The oldest is 5 years old, and the youngest is 3.
Our boyfriends actually were friends, and he brought her to my house one day, and that was like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It felt like we've known each other for years. She's a wonderful, amazing mom, the best mom that I know. She was the best person I've ever met and known in my life.
She would do anything for anyone.
Francis and the father of her children broke up, but she still dreamed of getting married.
She always used to talk about her wedding and everything, and at this point, she didn't even have a boyfriend. She had everything planned out.
Dreams became reality in 2012 when she started dating 29-year-old Eric Wolf.
Eric was a divorced single father, 1 young child. He had primary custody over her.
2 years into the relationship, Eric and Francis moved in together. Despite working 2 jobs, Francis did all she could to make time for her children and Eric's daughter, too.
She was constantly doing things with her girls when she wasn't working. Even with her stepdaughter, she was amazing.
Her days were long, but her life was full. Eric proposed, and the couple bought a house together.
Frances was very, very excited about getting married. Like, every day she was tagging me on Facebook or, like, sending me pictures. You know, she thought she was gonna be living the life that she's always dreamt of having and having that fairy tale wedding.
But when detectives pressed Franny's friends, they learned that Eric had a dark side.
They told me that they weren't super fond of her fiance.
Because my daughter spent a lot of time with Frances. She was like a second mother to my daughter. And my daughter did tell me several times of Eric being kind of like a drill sergeant. He seemed real cocky, just everything was about him and his daughter more so than Frances and her girls. I felt in my gut from the moment I found out that something happened to Frances, I felt like Eric had something to do with it. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, I didn't know why. I just felt like it was because of him that she's gone.
Police are determined to get to the bottom of Eric's suspicious behavior.
When we interviewed him, he stated when he saw her in the condition she was in, he did not call 911, and he didn't seem too upset about what had happened. At that point, he was somebody, definitely a person of interest in the homicide of Franny Craig.
Coming up, Eric's story gets stranger by the minute.
I didn't know if this was, you know, like self-inflicted accident.
That's what we need to find out too.
A tiny clue reveals a big surprise.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
And when police find the killer, it shocks everyone.
I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now.
After calling 911 following the brutal murder of his fiancée, Frances Craig, Eric Wolf is questioned by police about how he discovered his fiancée's body.
I came home this morning because I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I went upstairs, I checked both the girls' rooms before going in our bedroom.
Okay, so you came around to the foot of the bed and kind of looked to see where she was at.
That's exactly what I did.
Okay. Did you see anything on the mattress when you first came in?
I saw, I guess I might have saw that streak, but it didn't jump out like blood or anything.
Okay, so you saw something that just didn't jump out to you.
Yeah,
So this is bad.
Eric did not seem to register surprise, anger, hurt, anything that I think we all normally would want to see from a loved one when somebody is killed.
I thought maybe she had been drinking or something because she was in like almost like a funny position on the floor, which she doesn't drink hardly ever. I knew better than to wake her. I know from prior experience whenever I've woken her up, she's not a morning person and I get yelled at.
As the interview creeped close to an hour, Eric suggests a much darker reason for ignoring his fiancée sprawled out on the bedroom floor.
Up until just now, maybe since we've been here, I thought that if it wasn't an accident, then it was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
He indicated that he thought maybe she had committed suicide and just did not want to deal with it at that point. We found that being very odd and a red flag. Typically on a suicide, you'll find one stab wound or one gunshot wound. You won't find multiple stab wounds.
The prospect of Franny inflicting 90 stab wounds with her hands zip-tied sounds preposterous to the police. Even if it was physically possible, why wouldn't Eric have reacted with alarm?
So you didn't want to come to grips with it if she had done so.
Right, because
you don't want to.
To investigators, Eric's shifting story doesn't add up. Why would a woman everyone described as happy and carefree take her own life?
And the only reason I say self-induced is just because of how high-strung everything is right before this wedding, and
it's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Eric's strange comments could signal that he's traumatized over the death of his fiancée, or that he's hiding something. Determined to mine the truth, detectives decide to go right at their prime suspect.
Did you?
No.
Know what?
No, I didn't do this. I didn't know anything about it. I walked in, and I walked out, went to sleep, got up, went back in, and reported it.
But that brings me back to the questions we just asked. You made it at least halfway into that bedroom.
I did make it, and I admit that, and I'll admit that in front of whoever needs to hear it. But I want to make that perfectly clear that my stance on this is exactly what I said. I went in for whatever reason it was. I didn't react.
Without forensic evidence to hold him, Eric is free to go. But investigators vow to keep their eye on him. And the deeper they look, the more circumstantial evidence starts to build up.
We did do a pretty thorough background, as we always do. And one thing we found out is that Eric did have a little bit of assaultive past with prior girlfriends and an ex-wife. It seems like he has some violent tendencies.
One of the strangest facts in this case is that Eric Wolf has a father who is serving a life sentence in prison for his own first-degree murder conviction.
He was convicted on a cold case homicide investigation in the 90s and was serving life in prison for murder. So that certainly put up a red flag to us.
Was it possible that violent tendencies run in the family? Even if they did, what possible reason would Eric have to want his fiancée dead?
The homicide occurred in August, and I believe their wedding was planned in September. We talked with her parents and her friends. They told me that Franny had second thoughts, and they were trying to convince her that if she was not prepared to get married, that maybe she should wait. And they also said Eric had second thoughts. Eric may have got cold feet, didn't want to get married, didn't know how to end the relationship.
While police work diligently to prove Eric's guilt, Francis's friends wait and wonder.
We didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on and what happened with Francis and how she was murdered. We just knew she was dead.
Behind the scenes, police work tirelessly. They obtain a search warrant to collect Francis's and Eric's electronics, but quickly realize that Francis's cell phone is missing.
We do find the cell phone near Franny's house. It had been thrown up against a tree and damaged. Again, we're thinking that the cell phone has some pretty valuable information.
The cellular phone data quite often can be some of the most compelling evidence.
We were able to get the phone records, and nothing really stuck out as being her, Franny communicating with anybody that would give us suspicion.
With no unusual cell phone activity or signs of forced entry on the day of the murder, police stay focused on Eric.
Eric Wolf at the time was at work, and investigators went and checked out, what they could to verify his alibi.
Police checked the company's security cameras.
They do have one entrance. They do have a time card check-in, check-out system. We were able to verify he was at work, or allegedly at work, when the incident occurred. The problem with the system is there's some other exits that they're not supposed to use, but some of them have cameras, but other ones do not.
Was he able to leave his place of employment and get home to commit a murder and have all of that be undetected? Eric was the only person we could figure who would have any reason to want Franny dead.
Police investigating the homicide of 28-year-old Frances Craig cannot confirm her fiancé's alibi, since not every exit at his workplace had a security camera.
We couldn't rule out that sometime during the night he left and then came back.
Eric's shaky alibi and suspicious behavior at the crime scene doesn't give police enough to arrest him, but it does leave them with a drastic course of action.
If you are operating in a murder investigation thinking that man killed his fiancée in the home where the children were, you are thinking, we want to keep the children safe. We kept Eric's daughter from him while we tried to figure out what happened to Franny.
Both Eric's and Franny's daughters are removed from Eric's home and put in the custody of family members. With pressure mounting, detectives need to move fast to prove their theory or find a more plausible one.
At that point, we tried to determine any communication Franny may have been having with someone other than her fiancé.
Franny had an ex-boyfriend. He no longer lived in the area, but he had returned to the area recently and had some level of connection or interaction with Franny.
The police press Franny's ex. Could he have committed this heinous crime?
That young man was a nice young man, came from a very, very nice family.
And he did have an alibi where he was at the time of the incident. We were able to verify that alibi, so we were able to eliminate him.
If no one in Frances's immediate circle wished her harm, what about her coworkers? Detectives learned that while Frances worked at a retail store, she was involved in a frightening incident.
Where Franny was working, there was a couple shoplifters that had stolen some clothing. She confronted them.
The confrontation turned to violence when the mother of the two young shoplifters jumped in, attacking Frances. The assault left Frances with a severe eye injury, as well as emotional scars.
The incident at work left Frances really scared, nervous, cautious.
The mother of the shoplifters was actually criminally charged for a crime for the assault, some type of unarmed robbery. She was convicted.
So there was some concern that maybe this was a retaliation for that situation.
We did surprise them with a visit. They did have alibis on where they would have been at that time that the incident occurred.
Investigators are able to verify those alibis, eliminating the women as suspects. Frustrated detectives are still hoping that DNA from the crime scene will help them find the killer. But while they wait for results from the crime lab, the people of Jackson attend Franny's funeral, their emotions raw from the news of her violent death.
Her mail carrier showed up to her funeral because she left such an impact on that person. That's how loved and how missed Frances Craig is.
This was definitely a shock to the community because we don't have that many homicides.
I was scared. I just didn't know what to expect.
I was afraid to leave the house. I was afraid to do anything because we still had no answers as to what happened.
The overwhelming feeling was the pressure we were under to get this right.
Determined to find justice for Franny, investigators continue to drill down on Frances's fiancé. Hoping for an inside look at Eric Wolf, they bring in one of the couple's former roommates.
Ryan Marshall was friends with Eric Wolf. So Eric and Franny welcomed Ryan into their home to stay with them.
His house had caught on fire. and she was trying to help a friend out.
He lived with them until April of 2014. The homicide happened August of 2014, so he had a pretty good knowledge of the two of them. He said everything was good, and he actually vouched for Eric, saying Eric was a really good guy and a friend for a long time, and doesn't feel that Eric would ever do anything to harm Franny.
Speaking with Ryan doesn't give police new reasons to suspect Eric, but it doesn't clear him either.
3 months in, we've pretty much eliminated everybody of interest, anyone close to Franny other than Eric. But we don't have enough evidence to present to the prosecutor.
But then, a new piece of information arrives that brings a new suspect into the spotlight.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
Three months after Francis Craig's murder, the lab results from the crime scene finally arrive, and they provide a huge break in the case.
We're notified through a national index. The DNA located on the zip ties matched DNA in a database.
When somebody commits a felony, they have to submit to a DNA test. Somebody's DNA showed up on the zip ties that were used in the homicide. We get a name of Cortez Butler.
Who is Cortez Butler? Police waste no time looking into his criminal record.
We find out Cortez Butler served approximately 25 years for murder and was currently on parole in the Detroit area.
But we knew almost nothing else. We tried to determine if we could connect Cortez Butler to Franny Craig, to Eric Wolf, and we came up with nothing. We tried to determine if he had family locally, and we came up with nothing.
In fact, Cortez Butler appears to have no connection to Jackson whatsoever.
So we look in our database to see if we have any Cortez Butlers in any police report we've done, any place in Jackson County, and we find none.
Then it was this mad scramble of, well, then how do we even tie Cortez Butler to this? For all we know, he may have worked at Home Depot, and his DNA may be on these zip ties for a completely innocent reason.
The investigators connected with Cortez's parole officer. They got Cortez's phone number. A search warrant was prepared and signed for Cortez Butler's phone records. We learned that Cortez Butler's phone was in Jackson on the early morning hours of August 10th, the actual time of the murder. The rest of those phone records almost exclusively placed it in and around the greater Detroit area, never in Jackson.
But what reason would Butler have to harm Franny?
Eric remained the prime suspect. He was the only dude with a motive.
Maybe Eric was not ready to get married and didn't know how to end a relationship.
So then the thought process was, did Eric hire this person to kill Franny?
The cell phone records also connect Butler to some other shady characters.
We were able to identify a Clifford and Rodney McKee as being connected to Cortez Butler. Clifford McKee lived in the Detroit area. Clifford McKee was in prison for approximately 20 years for murder. We found out that Rodney McKee, he was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. We found out that he had committed an arson.
The arson that Rodney McKee perpetrated was against Donna and Ryan Marshall.
The police are stunned. Ryan Marshall is Eric Wolf's friend. the one who had been welcomed into Franny and Eric's home after his house burned down. But what kind of a connection could Ryan possibly have to a drug dealer like Rodney McKee?
Ryan Marshall's mother had been a heroin dealer for Rodney McKee.
But after months of dealing for Rodney, Ryan's mother decided she wanted out.
Donna Marshall refused to sell heroin for Rodney McKee.
Rodney didn't like to be told no.
Ryan's mother, Donna, held her ground, but Rodney retaliated.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it.
Ryan witnessed it all. He then contacted the police.
What was the connection between Eric Wolf, Cortez Butler, the Marshalls, and a drug dealer from Detroit? Detectives knew there was only one person who could answer the question, and soon they'd have a chance to ask him face to face.
Cortez Butler was arrested for yet another murder. Not Franny's murder, but another murder in the greater Detroit area.
We went down there in Detroit with one sole purpose: to gather information from Cortez Butler on what happened to Franny and hopefully be able to explain to us what Eric's role in this whole thing was. But Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal.
It was clear that whatever Cortez was going to say, it was not going to be, quote unquote, on the record.
Investigators have DNA evidence and phone records that link convicted killer Cortez Butler to Francis Craig's murder. They arranged to talk to him while he's detained for an unrelated homicide. But he immediately tries to shut them down.
Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal. I said, no one is giving you any kind of a deal without anyone knowing what you have to say.
Detectives press Butler hard until he finally agrees to talk. But only on one condition.
Cortez very pointedly and specifically asked repeatedly to not have the interview recorded.
If detectives agree not to record the interview, there's a chance Butler's testimony won't stand up in court. Still, with no other leads in the case, they decide to roll the dice.
We were there interviewing Cortez in the first place because we need to find out Eric Wolf's involvement in this. And it was dire that we did so as the children were about to go back with Eric Wolf. The whole idea for that was to keep these kids safe.
So the detectives tried to read him his rights. He didn't even want to be bothered with the rights. I know my rights. I think it was, bro, I know my rights, bro.
Butler wastes no time getting right to the point.
Cortez looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong." And I said, "Have what all wrong?" And he, at that time, let us know that Eric had absolutely nothing to do with this murder.
He goes, "I don't know this dude you're talking about, know nothing about him. Just trust me, he was not involved in this whatsoever."
The statement contradicts one of the investigators' strongest leads, but the next thing Butler says is even more explosive.
Cortez identifies himself as the killer. I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now, because I was almost in disbelief.
If Eric wasn't involved, Why had this cold-blooded criminal murdered a woman to whom he had no obvious connection? It all went back to Rodney McKee's arson case.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it. Ryan Marshall was a key witness in his arson case.
He made some threats to Ryan that either he not agree to testify or he was going to be killed.
Cortez told us that he had been hired by Rodney McKee to kill Ryan Marshall.
First, Butler had to find Ryan, who was homeless because of the fire.
So we found out from Cortez Butler that they had bad information. They had information that Ryan Marshall was living with Francis Craig and Eric Wolf.
Cortez Butler entered Francis and Eric's house to kill someone who was no longer there.
Franny wasn't even the intended target. Franny was as innocent of a victim as anybody could ever be. When he opened the door, he had made the decision that he was killing somebody while he was there.
He doesn't have to force entry. He gets into the house. He noticed the bedrooms have some kids in it. He walks past them, and he goes to Franny Craig's room. When he gets to Franny Craig's room, he asks her where Ryan is. She said he's not there. Cortez tells Franny not to look at him. In his words, he stated she looked at him, so he had to kill her.
The horrific details that Cortez reveals next leave detectives with no doubt about the guilt of the man sitting across from them.
He decided to bind her, trying to get information from her, but she would not cooperate.
Cortez stabbed her multiple times.
We will never know how long he took to torture her and butcher her. And it clearly took time and effort to stab and slice her in the manner that he did. She died in the service of keeping Ryan's identity and his location secret, or she quite frankly just didn't know.
Cortez Butler's chilling confession is nothing short of a game changer, both for detectives and for Eric Wolf.
It eliminated our hypothesis that Eric Wolf was responsible for Franny's death.
Eric wasn't involved. He's an odd duck kind of guy.
Eric was able to regain custody of his daughter.
I took from this case that we can never jump to conclusions. I was pretty convinced that he did it, not to the point that I could charge him, but I was pretty convinced I had the right person.
Now that investigators do have the right person, they're determined to put Cortez Butler away for life. But all of that is in jeopardy.
I didn't believe that Cortez's confession would be legally admissible in court because it wasn't recorded. And if Cortez Butler ever walked free again, I don't know that any of us are safe.
After months of dead ends, investigators finally have a confession from Francis Craig's killer. But prosecutors are concerned that his testimony may not hold up in court.
I was concerned that it would be legally inadmissible because it wasn't recorded. He was basically told, we're not planning to use this in court against you. I was concerned that he had not been properly advised of his Miranda rights. But we still had his DNA on the zip ties and the cell phone records. So I kept thinking, and I finally got myself legally to a point where I was convinced that we need to give this a shot.
In October of 2015, Cortez Butler is charged with Frances's murder. When the trial begins 6 months later, Butler appears relaxed, almost giddy.
Cortez really seemed to thrive in that trial atmosphere. He would seek out cameras and smile at them, give them this big, full teeth smile.
He wanted to fight just because he could. He wanted to run the show just because he could.
But that's just a warm-up for the verbal assault he launches into when he takes the stand.
Cortez Butler was a monster at that trial. He bragged on how many bodies he had. It was unbearable.
Butler gleefully describes his murderous past in gory detail. But when asked about killing Frances, he fiercely denies it.
He clearly was so excited to say why he didn't commit this murder, because he pleads to all of his murders, and he clearly didn't commit this one because he didn't plead to it.
Butler also denies ever confessing to police. But in a victory for prosecutors, the judge allows detectives to testify about Butler's confession.
We're able to get past that piece because he wasn't in custody for our case. He wasn't actually entitled to his Miranda warnings.
Eyewitness accounts play a major role in trying to move the jury, beginning with Eric's daughter, who found Franny dead.
Alexis was our first witness up there, and I don't know that I will ever forget the audible gasps and sobs and emotion pouring from the jury just from that first witness.
The physical evidence is laid out.
We have Cortez Butler's DNA on the zip ties that were used in the homicide, and we also have phone tracking information showing Cortez Butler and Jackson.
Prosecutors make a compelling case, but without a recording of Butler's confession. It's the detective's word against Butler's. When the jury returns with the verdict, there's no guarantee which way the cards will fall.
Cortez Butler was convicted of first-degree murder, and he won't ever walk free again.
The sentence was life without the possibility of parole for the premeditation murder of Franny Craig.
This was a complicated story to tell to a jury. It is a difficult one for all of us to wrap our brains around, even still.
Cortez goes to look for Ryan at her house, and he doesn't find him, and murders Franny in her own bed while she's doing nothing wrong.
Franny had no connection to her killer whatsoever. We can rest maybe a little easier that the bad guys won't ever hurt anybody else, at least not outside of the walls of prison. But none of it brings Franny back.
Today, Frances's two daughters live with their father. Those closest to Frances do everything they can to hold on to her memory.
Franny's family, I know, they've been lost ever since. I've been lost ever since Frances has been murdered.
I want people to remember how happy of a person she was, how generous, how nice and kind she was.
I miss Frances so much, and there's not a day that goes by that I do not think about her. I know that she's watching over everybody and making sure that everybody's good, because that's the type of person she was.
I wish I had known her. and I hope I honored her in my handling of this case.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to 𝐔𝐧𝐞𝐈.com.